What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit. And today we're going to be talking Week 28, a little recap of all the things that happened in Week 28. Plus, we got a lot of news about the finals, All-Star Game, all kinds of other stuff going on. But first, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me, everybody out there in YouTube land. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, I greatly appreciate everything you guys do for me. If you're new, please hit a like, hit a subscribe, hit that bell for alerts. I do Overwatch League content a few times a week, so you'll be alerted to when I got new stuff going up. So, got a lot to talk about with finals, how they're going to be played out, All-Star Game stuff. Also, we have standings, matches to talk about, all kinds of things going on. And we'll go over it towards the end. We'll start talking about standings and stuff like that. First, I want to talk a lot about the news and some things we had going on, and work our way into the matches and talk about one or two of them. I'm more team-centric this weekend and next weekend. We're going to be, just because we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the season, the final 2 weeks, we want to see where these teams are at. I want to talk more team-specific stuff. But first, let's talk some news. We finally got confirmation on how the finals are going to work and, just the scheduling out of everything, dates. We don't have a specific site yet. We have a general idea. Where we go into the playoffs. The finals are going to be on the 8th through the 10th, finals weekend, Final Four, I guess, if you want to call it that, name it something. I'm sure that's copyrighted. Whatever, championship weekend, whatever you want to call it. So grand finals weekend, 8th through the 10th of October. So we're a week off to 2 weeks off from where we were last year, which makes sense. Now we have the grand finals weekend all played out. Asia number 2 versus NA number 1. NA number 2 versus Asia 2 or Asia 1 after that. And these are all Asia specific times to start. If you're on the East Coast, you're gonna have to get up early. You're gonna be having some brunch with this. We're gonna have the next set of matches are gonna be on Friday, where we have the highest seeded loser taking on the next seeded loser, and then we have the winner of both the two matches taking each other on, and then the final match is going to be the winner of loser game 1 versus the loser of the winner's game, which will then take us to Saturday, which will be gonna be an early one, guys. Gonna be 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 a.m. Pacific, obviously 9 p.m. in China, somewhere in that time range in Korea. I don't know exactly, but early morning on Saturday, we are going to have our grand finals. We're not going to do it on Sunday this year. It's going to be early in the morning. I like the way they're setting it up. The times they are what they are if you're running from Asia. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with getting up in the morning and watching great Overwatch. It doesn't bother me. Yeah, if I'm on Pacific, I'm a little pissed off. Am I going to get up for the 5 a.m. loser matches? Probably not. Probably watch that after I watch the next two at the 7 and 9. It's going to be great regardless. I don't know exactly where they're going to play it. They haven't said yet. I'm all for playing in the Apex Arena. I've said that before. I think it'll be fantastic. Haven't heard any word. And if you guys have heard word, I've been looking around for a while. I haven't heard word if you've heard anything, please comment down below. But I haven't heard if they're playing it on LAN, playing it online. I want to say I think they're going to play it on LAN just because they can bubble the 2 teams together, or the 4 teams together, and the production crew and all that. I think, kind of like the NBA's doing right now, I think you could get them in a LAN situation. Like I said, I think going back and doing it in the arena where we had the most memorable championships before the Overwatch League and Apex happened, I think that would be a great full circle kind of thing to do. It makes sense to me. They did do the show match there. We talked about this before when they were announcing that they're going to Asia and all that. I would love to see it. I can't wait. It's going to be fun. Is it later than normal? But that's okay. We got time to think about it, time to talk about stuff. We're going to have a lot of time in between, which brings us to the next point. We have the All-Star Games in between, which I like them in the midseason, but obviously this year it just didn't happen. So we have 2 sets of All-Star Games. Obviously, it's going to be harder to run. So the schedule for that, the Asian All-Star, essentially the APAC All-Star Game, weekend will be on start Saturday the 26th. And then, or on Saturday, it's the 26th, I should say. And then the North American All-Stars will be on the 3rd of October. So we had that going on. I don't know what that means as far as now. The one weird thing going here is I would have liked to have seen them flipping around just because the NA guys are going to, if they're involved in the ones that are involved in the grand finals, it's going to be hard to get them into the All-Star game. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where these guys, the All-Star game, they just screw around and have fun. And that's really what it is. Here's the notes that the things that we want to watch. We're going to have 2 talent takedown matches, one in each region, both 6v6. It's going to be fun. Of course, that one's usually the marquee event. We've narrowed down all of the other stuff to the Widow 1v1 tournament, which is what really everybody wants to see. And then a 3-map 6v6, much like we've done in the past, All-Star game, which hopefully they at least play something that's not too goofy. It's fun when they play, whenever they do different things. It's just, I like seeing guys on different heroes and all that. But, it is what it is. It's an all-star game. I just want it to be fun. Plus, it fills the gap in between our end of the playoff brackets before the finals weekend. So that is going to be that on that topic. I always look forward to the talent takedown. I think that's fun. They always talk trash and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, we don't have Monte Cristo coming out in any kind of costume this year, which sucks. But hopefully someone picks up the torch other than Bren wearing Widowmaker leggings, which is frightening on so many levels. But we have that. Now, there was one other good thing. Now, we were talking about stuff. We're trying to figure out what patch they were on last week. Are they going to run this patch? I don't think they're going to run that patch. So they finally, after more than almost 3 years, we finally have a video thing that is explaining the exact patch that we're running on. It was dropped on Thursday or Friday, after I did the preview show for the weekend. But thank God that they've done this. It used to be and still is semi-annoying trying to figure out, especially when they're doing it more frequently now, what patch are they running? They say they want to run the live patch, but they're always a little bit off. So come playoff time, we have the live patch that's up now with the Orisa nerfs, the stupid Roadhog buffs, Brig nerfs, and all that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the playoffs. And there are some teams that played well this weekend, which we were trying to speculate on meta, which we're moving into that right now. Let's move into the week, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I just wanted to touch on that really quick. We'll talk meta for a second, and then we'll dive into just kind of a quick match review, and then look at the standings, and then move on from there. Meta was kind of all over the place. Seoul seemed to set the tone with their Mercy Ashe kind of dive thing going on. Winston Diva, little Winston Sigma, more Winston Diva, running either an Ana or a BAP with that, and generally a Sombra. That seemed to be prevalent. I think some teams saw that work and were like, hey, let's try this. But there was some double shield. There were some things going on like that. But we saw a lot of Sombra, a lot of Ashe, and Seoul they leaned on the Mercy pocketed Ashe and putting profit on that on the weekend, which, that in and of itself is frightening, just thinking about it. And then seeing what he did this weekend was absolutely nuts. If that guy is doing that and the rest of their team playing really well, that's going to make the Asia bracket a little more interesting than I think it is right before this week happened. Granted, London twice in those wins, still W's. I go back to that when I was people were getting on me about the Mayhem. Yeah, still W's. You guys can't beat them. But yeah, the meta was very, very interesting, and it was fun watching it play out. I mean, I didn't think there was going to be much dive. I thought we were just going to go back to May Reaper or maybe see some rush comps, which San Francisco runs really well. But this week they kind of ran into something, which they needed to maybe. I think that was a refocusing match against the Fusion. But let's before we talk about that, we dive into that for a second. All right, we'll just run down the schedule. It was 3 Overwatch most of the weekend. There was a couple of compelling matches, but in general, it was the same old story. So one thing with the hero pools that I'm on the fence with sometimes. unfortunately, some teams get it, other teams don't, and they just get smoked. And that's one of the problems with that. But this week coming up is the last week we're going to have to worry about that. We'll see what they do for next year. But as far as the schedule went, Seoul 3-0's the Spitfire, Florida 3-1's the Titans, Gladiators 3-0 Dallas, Seoul on Saturday 3-0's New York, which was surprising. Shanghai comes in and destroys London. Paris beats Atlanta 3-2 in one of the weirdest matches I think I've ever watched in my life. Entertaining. Was it greatly played? No, it wasn't Boston, Houston level bad clown fiesta, but it was like a predetermined fiesta, it seemed like, by Atlanta. Anyway, next match we had Dallas 3-0ing Vancouver, then the Gladiators 3-0ing Boston, and then the shocker of the weekend, no pun intended, well, maybe a little bit, Fusion 3-0 the San Francisco Shock. And then finally on Sunday, we have a 3-0 from Seoul over the London Spitfire. Once again, Seoul goes 9-0 on the weekend with maps, and London goes 0-9. They haven't won a map. I think they're on an 0-16 map streak. Trying to get up there with the likes of the Dragons and the Old Mayhem and the Guangzhou Charge from last year. They have 1 week left. We'll see what happens. And they have Seoul staring right at them with looking for another 3-0. It's possible they get to 0-19. Just abysmal. They dropped off the table. San Francisco comes back with a vengeance against Toronto, disposes of them rather easily. The Valiant gut one out against the Mayhem 3-2. Florida looked like they were in the driver's seat, but the Valiant leaned on that Seoul strategy later on in that match and turned it around on KSP's shoulders and beat the Mayhem 3-2. And then finally, Vancouver, another surprise of the weekend, they beat Atlanta. It didn't feel like Atlanta. Felt like Atlanta was kind of fucking around. I don't know what they were doing. I think they're kind of locked in a certain area, and they're just like, well, we're in this range of areas. Let's just not tip our hand as to what we can play and what we can't play, and just try and win matches, having fun. And I don't know if that worked. Well, obviously in this case it did not. But those are the matches. That's what we had. So let's talk about a couple teams. And we'll hit on a couple of the matches. Now, this weekend, Seoul was absolutely on fire. And one of the reasons why, other than my boy, I stand Prophet. We all know this. He is my boy. And someone figured out, hey, if you give him a Mercy Pocket and the Ash fucking Viper rifle and some dynamite, he's going to fucking kill everybody. He had 5 deadlifts in the weekend in 9 maps. That's fucking stupid. And they weren't like 20% or 30%. They were over 75%. So obviously look for him on Roll Stars, or on the roll call this week. Not only that, Tuyu came in this week, new player, and God, did he make a difference. Him and Gesture looked phenomenal. Yes, they did play London twice, but they rolled New York too. It's not like they played 3 bad teams. They rolled New York in the middle, who looked like they were coming around. And New York looked kind of lost a little bit. They just didn't know what to expect. Their DPS guys are kind of weird right now. I'm not the biggest fan of how they're playing. They're just kind of meh. Yeah, you could say Haxel is handcuffed, but he has other things he could play. He can play Doomfist. He can play May if they wanted to. It was just kind of lackluster on their part. But that's, beside the point. They have a lot that they can work on in the next week or two. Plus, we have a couple week break where we get back to no hero pools. I think some of these teams that are in the New York realm, veteran players, they're kind of looking forward, not necessarily looking at right now. Because it's a 7-team tournament in APAC, so they'll be okay. But Seoul, if they continue this play like this, running this dive, now it's going to be different when we have all the heroes back into the pool, and with the nerfs and the buffs and all the stuff that are going on, for stuff to flesh out a little bit, especially in the first week of the playoffs. That's why I kind of didn't want them to do hero pools now, especially if they're going to run that new patch. I would have loved to have seen them do it this week. Yeah, everybody doesn't get to play it live, but it would give us some inkling as to what could happen and give them a basis to run into the playoffs with something. Hey, this kind of worked what Seoul was doing or what Atlanta did or whoever. Yeah, they might not tip their hand or anything like that, like I was saying before about Atlanta. But in general, Seoul was on top of their game. Their supports are playing great, but Dosen was fantastic this weekend. They just look like what we wanted them to look like, for crying out loud. It took fucking 28 weeks to get here. They look like the team that could, potentially, and this is when, back when we were doing everything, when everybody's in the same place, they could potentially be in the top 3. Now, they just fell off the table and they looked terrible for all this time, and they finally found a method that they could play. And I think Tuyu putting him in and just securing that off-tank role, which is really, really important. I think if they keep him in there, it's much like New York. Play Bianca at this point. I love Hotba, but Bianca, they have such a better look when Bianca's in there to me. Enough about Seoul. Let's talk about a couple other teams this week that showed up and looked really good. And one of them was the Gladiators looked really good this weekend. They played phenomenally. Yeah, they played Dallas, who is decent. They showed some signs in the Countdown Cup. Dallas looked pretty decent. Yeah, they ran into San Francisco, but that's like running. They're not on the same level as them. I thought the Gladiators and them would be a good match, but the Gladiators came out and just kind of rolled them really hard. The Gladiators, much like Seoul, are starting to play to their potential this week. Yeah, they had Boston later on in the week, but who the fuck can't beat them? But they still beat Dallas rather handily, who is in that middle mishmash of teams that could beat somebody one week and lose to somebody the next. So it's not like they played absolute hot garbage. Birdring looked really good. I also like their tank line played phenomenally this weekend too. Oj and Space were on it. They look good. They just look good all around. I liked what we're seeing from them this week. And Dallas, they came back later on in the week and beat Vancouver. That's fine. They needed to get that win too, desperately. And it just shows that Dallas is not as bad as what could have happened after the whole debacle a week or two ago with the decay situation and the coaching situation and all that. They seem to be doing well. I think they just did not have a handle on what was going on in this matter. They kind of played what they were comfortable on, and the Gladiators just were better. And then they came back and did what they had to do to Vancouver. Let's talk about, just for a minute, we'll talk about the San Francisco-Philly match. Now, this match was close, a close 3-0. Philly did dominate when necessary, but I think it was one of those things where the Shock just thought they were going to come in like they did the week before, and especially on certain maps, like Kings Row, and just, we're going to do the rush comp, we're just going to fucking own you. And Philadelphia had none of it this week. Alarm, on fire. Sato, fantastic. Just across the board, Philadelphia played their best game, and they absolutely wrecked them. Yeah, there was no time where I thought Philadelphia was going to choke. I mean, yeah, I thought San Francisco was going to win this match, and I thought San Francisco would win. I don't think there was going to be a choking point, is what I'm getting at. I thought San Francisco would come back, take Anubis, then, potentially hit him on Havana and then bring it into a 5 again and see where we're at when we got to Control, because Control, everything's up in the air. But Philadelphia's game plan and just the way they played together and cohesively, and their ult economy was fantastic in this, which you don't normally beat the Shock on that, but they were just unbelievably good. And like I said, Shock didn't play bad. Yeah, kind of shaky on Li Jiang. I think they got kicked in the teeth a little bit on that one. But the other maps were really close. It's just Philadelphia this week had their number. And, props to Philly on that. They showed me something. They showed resiliency. Was it a playoff match? No. But they beat a team, the number one team essentially in the region at that point. They wanted this because they wanted to be the number one team. They secured the number one seed throughout the playoffs and dropped the Shock to 2. This is NA side. Shanghai's obviously number 1 over in APAC. Overall, Shanghai's number 1, I believe. If you go to the general season standings, Shanghai's 1, Philly's 2, San Francisco's 3. Yeah, that match was for a 3-1 match, or a 3-0 match. That was some of the most exciting, well-played Overwatch I've seen, with just little mistakes getting exploited by both teams. Just absolutely played unbelievably well. Philadelphia comes out on top. They're looking good heading into the playoffs. I think they got one more match this week. San Francisco has a match this week. They also had one more, and they just absolutely, unfortunately, Toronto was on the receiving end of angry Shock, which you don't want. I mean, we could talk about the Mayhem Valiant match for a quick second. I was very disappointed in my team at the end, towards the end of that match. I'm not going to lie. They came out, they looked fantastic. BQB was all over the place. He's still the best Ash in the league. I don't care what anyone says. Yeah, KSB might have outed him at the end of that match, or outplayed him. But still, overall, for the weekend, he was 10 final blows per 10 minutes. Massive amount of eliminations and damage. That aside, I really liked what I saw from the Mayhem in the match in Vancouver and the first two maps versus Vancouver, or versus the Los Angeles Valiant. Now, the one thing that is starting to bother me a little bit is their halftime adjustments and their on-the-fly adjustments sometimes are not that great. So the Valiant come out and they start fucking smoking them because they're running that comp that Soul ran, and they're running it really well. The Mayhem are keeping up with them. The maps were close. The thing is they were getting gutted out because they were getting outplayed by KSP playing the Ash. And the one thing that they weren't doing, it was like too little too late. By the time they got to the fifth map, the momentum had shifted to the Valiant. And then they were kind of seeking out, and this is after losing one segment of the control part in map 5. And, they just didn't finish. I want to see some finish from this team when they get kicked in the teeth a little bit. I want to see them come back in these matches when a team comes back on fire and starts giving it to them, maybe starting a reverse sweep kind of scenario and momentum shifting and just having none of it and just saying, nope, not today. They need to get more of that. They need to focus on figuring out what to do in dire, not necessarily dire situations, but when you're getting outplayed, you need to figure out what to do. Instead of just trying to ram your head against the wall, reel it in. Yeah, you might lose a map or two, but just reel it in, figure it out, take care of business. Valiant, on the other hand, they showed a lot of balls in this match to me. Honestly, they were getting absolutely hammered in the first two maps, but they went into halftime. They adjusted. They brought in that strategy. It worked fantastically for them. Everybody was on point. I got to tip my hats to them. Like I said, they played really, really well. This is looking good for the Valiant too, because they've proven in the last couple of weeks, they can hang with teams that are allegedly better than them and beat them, like the Valiant or like the Mayhem. They could beat the Mayhem. They could beat teams like the Gladiators coming up this week. I think that's going to be a close match, but we'll talk about that later at the end of the week. But they're looking good going into this tournament, especially with their coaching staff. And Florida, too. Florida's coaching staff has done a really good job. Did I ever think that the Mayhem were going to be in this position at the beginning of the year? Fuck no, I did not. Let's just put that out there. I did not think that they were going to be locking down the 4 seed. And potentially, before the day started, going, man, if Atlanta, on Saturday, I'm going, man, if Atlanta wins and Florida beats the Valiant, they could actually be the 3 seed. That was just, I never thought that would happen. So I'm liking what's going on. I'm going to start getting a little nitpicky, though, because they're playing well, and I'm going to start poking a little bit. The luster's going to start wearing off of being in 3rd, 4th place when they could potentially be taking it to the next level and get up there with the Shock and the Fusion. They need to finish off teams like the Valiant. The Valiant, on the other hand, like I was saying, I got into a Mayhem rant there. I apologize. The Valiant, on the other hand, are looking good. I am liking their chances going in this tournament. They're going to be a kind of a wild card seed where, whoever they play, I would not put it past them to beat some of these teams that are better, even though there's some of them are going to have their comfort picks pack and that kind of stuff. With the new patch that's in, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And, on ladder, you're seeing all kinds of crazy stuff. You're seeing Roadhog Zarya. You're seeing all kinds of goofy crap. These guys are going to probably run a main tank and an off tank, but you never know. There could be scenarios and maps where they're running Ball Winston. There could be, Ball Diva. You don't know what you're going to see. You're probably going to see some Hog on certain maps. Definitely on Controller, you're probably going to see some of that. We'll get into more meta discussion in the week in between and, dive more into that, and we'll talk about a lot of other stuff in that. We're going to have, a lot of fun with that. Let's talk standings really quick. We're just going to go over this and then leave you at that for the weekend, or for the beginning part of the week. We'll have Roll Stars coming up tomorrow, and then we'll dive into predictions and that stuff for week 28. So let's talk standings, because We haven't really talked about it too much. Now it's starting to matter. I mean, it started to matter last week and the week before a little bit. But now we got 1 week left. A lot of teams are done, or some teams are done, I should say. Some teams have a few matches left to play. Okay, so running down the schedule, we have our top 4 teams are locked right now. We have in NA. Let's talk NA first. We have the Fusion at number 1, the Shock at number 2, the Eternal locked in at 3, and the Mayhem locked in at 4. Then it's kind of mucky underneath that a little bit. We have a lot of teams that could possibly move up and down, here and there. Valiant, Reign, Gladiators, especially that whole area there, we could see some movement. Especially the Gladiators have 3 matches this weekend. They finish up with the Valiant, which could potentially be for the 5 seed if things kind of work their way out and whatnot and what have you. That's going to be fun. The rest of the teams in there, Fuel, Defiant, Outlaws, Titans, Justice, Uprising, they're all kind of locked into where they're at, but Valiant, Reign, and Gladiators are going to be jockeying for some position this week, which, we'll have our seedings by Sunday night. Obviously, we'll start spending time on that, talking where we think metas and stuff like that are going to go. We could have 2 different ones, too, which will be fun when we get to the finals. APAC region, we're going to have the Dragons locked in at 1, and then the Charge locked in at 2, and the Excelsior locked in at 3. Now, the Dynasty this weekend, they jumped up from 6 all the way up to 4, which is crazy. And they have to play the Spitfire again, who can't get out of their own way right now and are just on a downward swing, and they just look absolutely terrible, which is disappointing. But that's neither here nor there right now. They're sitting in 4, tied with the Spark at 11-11. This weekend's going to be big for that, especially in a smaller bracket where you have 7 teams. Seeding matters a little bit more. Chengdu's locked in at 6. I think that would be a scary proposition for a team in the upper half of the bracket, the way the meta could play out for them. Because if you get in a situation where they get to run a lot of ball and all that, well, they're going to do it anyway. But if it's viable, especially if they can run Diva along with that, or potentially, a Roadhog, they'll come up with something wacky involving ball. Potentially Farah. Who knows where it's going to go. They're going to be frightening at that 6 hole. I would not want to play them at all. And this is me. Generally, I throw the Hunters out into, their own dimension. But I think that they could make some noise later on. Spitfire they're done at 7. Unfortunately, they need to rework some stuff. But that's the standings. It's going to be fun to see how some of this middle stuff plays out this weekend, which we'll talk about a lot more on Thursday of this week. But that's going to do it for the recap for the weekend. Thank you very much for joining me. Everybody out there on YouTube, thank you very much for all of the likes, all of the subscribes, conversations we've been having either here or on Twitter. It's been greatly appreciated and a lot of fun. Everybody in podcast land, thank you very much for joining. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody out there, stay safe. Have a good rest of your day. And we will see you with Roll Call on Wednesday.